me press record and we'll get started. For our just want to welcome everybody today, and especially want to welcome my co-host today, Kimberly Fox. Yay! This is the face, the woman behind the beautiful, gorgeous images of of the charts. And I don't, Kim, when did we talk? It was last summer at some point, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Hey, what are you up to?" And she's like, "I'm like battling forest fires in California." And I was like, "Would you make some charts?" And you said yes.
Yeah, I've been sort of behind the scenes, but it's so nice, even in talking about this evening, Mike and I were talking, and it was sort of like, I haven't even met all of you. Well, I know some of you. But anyway, I'm just really happy to be here and to kind of, anytime I hear stories of how this work is going in classrooms with real live teachers, with real live students, it just makes me so happy, because most of the drawings are done at like 5:30 in the morning while I hide from my toddler. So
And Alice may make a visit, although maybe she's going to bed right now. No, yes. At any rate, this is right now we have an intimate group, so this is for you this time. I mean, if some of you showed up to the summer meeting in July, you'll know a lot of information was shared then. And you can check out that meeting that happened in July for more information on my YouTube channel. Just type in Mike Oakes, look for the Mike Oakes that looks like me. There's several of them across the country. And you can see that it's about an hour-long meeting where we talk about more of the nuts and bolts of the curriculum, the ins and outs. But what we wanted to do for this meeting is we just want to stay in touch and see how things are going. If you have any questions, how we can be helpful and meaningful to you in this work. But specifically, we're going to talk about where things stand right now. Kim's going to share some of her experiences and expertise on vocabulary, especially as a K-2 expert. But she's also has a special expertise in creating a good culture, a good sort of milieu of word acquisition and vocabulary. So she's going to share some tips of like inside and outside of this vocabulary curriculum. Word love, that we've all decided that got the top votes. How we can support vocabulary all the time in and out of the curriculum. And then we'll get some Q&A from you. So feel free, I'll say, type some questions that you have in the chat and we'll come back to them at some point. But right now our group is intimate enough, 12 participants, so it means 10 of you. I think even though we have about 70 or 80 that may join us at some point, we'll get to a little Q&A to see how we can be helpful with anything. I'll give you some news and then we'll call it a night. So Kim, I'm going to pass it to you to share some things that you're thinking about when it comes to vocabulary.
So when we're thinking about vocabulary, we obviously have these charts, these resources. They're pretty cute, if you ask me. And by cute, I mean powerful. But we also want to think about, at the beginning of the year, setting up a culture of kids that are into and on board for vocabulary work, because frankly, building a vocabulary is about usage, and with that comes some approximation and some messiness. And whenever we're asking kids to approximate and allow for that messiness, we want things to feel as safe and sort of like we're all doing this work together. So we really want to set kids up right from the start to be sort of on about vocabulary, and also to be willing to try some stuff out and maybe butcher some things. How many of you have butchered a word that you were trying to work in and you're like, ooh, no, that did not go well? Yeah. And so we're asking kids to do that all the time. And so we want to set up this like, wow, cool. Yeah. Oh, I didn't think about using it that way. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So a couple of things that we can think about is we can think about the language that we use with our students. And even when you're talking to, as Mike said, most of my work is in K-2. So even when we're talking to our little babies, we want to be using a level of vocabulary that might be a notch above what kids are able to do in terms of their own oral language at that point. So we want to use words that might feel a little new and a little like, whoa, that's a big fancy word. And that's okay, because the more we use words like that, the more kids are going to start to use them themselves. So we want to think about the words that we model. And then I've been thinking a lot about sort of these creating these categories or buckets to let kids in on. So like, hey, y'all, here in, class 4 to 17, we're going to be really thinking about words this year. And one thing that I've been thinking about words is like words that describe people, words that describe characters. So like character traits, character feelings. And you could do this work across your day. You could think about characters in the books that we're reading, but we can also think about ourselves. I might say something like, oh my goodness, friends, I left my house at the right time, at the time I usually did, and traffic was just so bad. And I started feeling really, how did I feel? I wasn't sad. I wasn't, I kind of felt like anxious, right? I kind of felt like a little like flustered, right? Using some words and kind of letting kids see the transparency of trying to find the right word. So I'm thinking about conversations around words that describe people, but also actions. So you might bring in some of these conversations after recess. You might talk about this in terms of, all right, friends, we're going to have a fire drill this afternoon. And we know that when we have a fire drill, are we going to run in the halls? No way. Instead, we are going to, I'm trying to think of other words other than walk. Trudge. We're going to trudge in the halls. Trudge, right? We're going to like move gracefully through the halls without screaming at people. Yes, can we get on board for that? So knowing that these things are going to happen, incorporating words to describe it. So I'm thinking about morning meeting. I'm thinking about, end of the day, or, when you have that conversation after lunch, you can get the report from the people who've been watching them for the last 45 minutes. You're like, so I have heard some things about what happened last period. I'm thinking it sounded like things were quite rambunctious, wouldn't you say? And so using some of this language and encouraging kids to use some of this language as well. Then we can think about how kids can use some of these words let me backtrack. So one of the things is also just to make these words that we're using visual. So as you're reading text, as you're having conversations, you might be building a chart of words that are better than sad, better than happy. How can we think about some of these words that are somehow related and build a bank of them with your students? Then we can have kids use and encourage kids to use some of these words in their independent practice. So I'm thinking about kids writing narratives at the beginning of the year. They're doing lots and lots of describing. We see this with kids all the time. I was happy. It was cool. Okay, what does cool mean? Well, let's talk about that. Like, what does that mean? What's a word that would help your reader know exactly what you were talking about that's going to work even better than cool, right? So thinking about encouraging kids to try some of this work out in their writing, but also when they're talking to their reading partners, their clubs, really thinking, okay, well, you read this book, but maybe some of your classmates haven't. Like, could you tell them a bit about this character, and kind of give kids a little bit of like try it out, see how it goes, and know that it's not always going to go perfectly, right? They're going to try out a word that's not going to quite fit, and you want to, as a class and as an educator, celebrate that approximation. Yeah, I totally know why you chose that word. That I can sort of see how your mind is working, and encouraging kids to be doing this work on their own with their partners, and notice when kids are doing cool stuff with their vocabulary. If you hear kids trying out a word that you don't know or wouldn't have used in that context, but you can you're like, oh, wow, cool. You use that word. That's so interesting. Can we add that to the bank? Do you think that's more of like a happy or a mad? Like, how does that word fit. I feel like this is how this is with like, you hear new words that I'm gonna sound, you hear you hear words where you're like, what does that word mean? What does the word extra mean? Or what do these words that people are saying that I'm like, I hear this word, I know this is a thing, what does this mean? So giving our kids the opportunity to be sort of in a leadership role with some of these words as well, where they're sort of like trying words out, talking about words that they use with their friends, maybe, school words that they use with their friends, or they use with their family, thinking about some of the words that that they can sort of start to approximate. So I also wanted to, when we can, we want to make this kind of invisible work of vocabulary, of oral language, as visual as we can. So I wanted to give a couple of tips for how to make visuals. How do I do this? Bear with me here. See, I should have just done this before. Yes. Screen. Mike, is there anything you would want to add to that while
while you're getting that set up, I just want to first say thank you. I think what you've added to this is just to illustrate for us that vocabulary is not just about teaching and learning individual words. That vocabulary is something that kids can acquire all the time through your passion and curiosity and interest around words. So if you've been following some of the work we've been doing, we talk about the 4 things that help with vocabulary acquisition. I always say number 4 in ascending order of importance is creating a culture of word love, right? Creating that culture where you just on your sleeve of loving words, right? And this is true for anything. You want kids to be passionate about grammar. You want kids to be passionate about spelling. You want kids to be passionate about anything. It starts with us being passionate ourselves and being curious about it in our day-to-day interactions with kids. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful that Kim shared this with us, because like, what are the ways in which we can create that culture and that climate, that milieu of word love? And then she talks about ways to transfer it. Like you have this culture, you have the curriculum, and then you have a way to like, now let's use it, let's transfer it back into the other places that we're doing and continue being curious about it. So thank you, Kim.
As you're using the curriculum and a word sort of comes up that connects to a word that you've been talking about over the last couple of days or last couple of weeks, you can say, yeah, this kind of reminds me. Remember when we read, when I'm thinking about when I'm reading a book with kids, whether I'm reading a book in a preschool classroom or whether I'm reading a book with sixth graders, I want to be thinking about the vocabulary that's in the book, but then also the vocabulary that happens around the book. So how are we talking about this character, this story, and what are the ways that our language is going to, how can our language sort of be that triangle of like the text to us to be the way that we connect with the book? So whenever I'm thinking about making visuals, bear with me, very messy. My 4th grade teacher told me my handwriting would never be pretty. And because I hold my pencil wrong. She's not wrong. My handwriting is not pretty, but I'm pretty good with the pencil in other ways. Okay, so when we're thinking about building, that's not what I meant to do. Whoop. So when we're thinking about this work, we want to think about a word. It could be a word that shows up in a book. It could be a word that's coming up in conversation. I really want to think about an example that goes with it. So this often happens when you're like, okay, well, I have to draw, I'm thinking about real life, exhausted, right? Okay, well, how do I draw exhausted? I could draw exhausted with like my face and my body, but I also can draw exhausted when I'm just sitting with my face and my body looking exhausted, and my 3-year-old is yapping in my ear and saying all the things that 3-year-olds say. Like, that is an example, but it also will help my drawing if I kind of show this scenario that the word, or example that the word brings to mind. So draw the example. So I was thinking about like the word, like I'm thinking about the word let's see, this, I was thinking about the word excited. Okay, so excited, yes, I can draw, excited. But I also could be like, oh, I'm excited when there's a snow day. Y'all remember snow days? Yeah, it's gonna happen, right? Snow days. Okay, I'm excited when I find out and I see, mostly I see like the, Nix alert on my phone or something like that, but whatever, that I'm excited. And when I'm drawing my people, I wanna think about body, I wanna think about face, and I wanna think about hair. So when I'm thinking about body, as Mike and I have been looking at converting the drawings to color images where we have arms and legs, underneath all of that, same old bubble people, right? Same old, same old. So I'm thinking about my body. I've got my little head here. I've got my body here. And then I can think about where my arms are and where my feet are. Quick tip, if you're not sure, do a quick act it out in your, either physically act it out or just like sort of imagine it in your mind. Imagine you're drawing kids sitting on the rug, right? And you're like, where are their feet going? Okay, I can kind of see it in my mind, and it might even help me to like very precariously get into that position. So I think about where the arms and the legs are. So I'm imagining, this person is supposed to be like running. Okay, well then I've got my there, right? If I've got a person standing still, it's really about like where the feet are going. And trust me, I'll be the first one to tell you, you can literally have an art degree and you'll draw this in front of kids and completely botch it. So just know I'm there on your shoulder telling you it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So I've got, I'm thinking about like, what if I want my person to be walking this way? I'm thinking the feet want to be going forward. Same thing with animals. It's like got my head, the body's going to be in a slightly different place. But so like, okay, there's my little, and then we get into the face, that kind of thing.
This is amazing. These are like trade secrets that you're like sharing with us.
Hot tip. In thinking about facial expressions, so I've got my little person here. Facial expressions are really important when you're talking about vocabulary because there's so much nuance. How do we show the difference between nervous and excited, right? How do we show
Uh-oh, is it my internet? Are y'all here? Okay, I see people moving. We're gonna let Kim come back on in a minute, but I just want to point out that one of the things that we'd like to provide is not only teaching fish as Kim is doing, but also giving you fish. And Kim has given us a lot of fish in her charts, and I learned so much. I mean, what I might take from this is, and what she's sharing with me is, if I'm choosing different words that I want to teach and I want to create a chart or an image for that, she's giving me some tips for like how to make those charts briefly, like really quickly. And I'll say from my own experience, when I started making charts, it took a while. I used to start with stick figures, and then I got the tip from Kim that was like, no, draw the circles for the body and the head, and then like the arms can be sticks, and then you can work a little bit more from there than if like the torso. I know that seems like such a strange thing to say, like don't make the torso a stick, but making the torso more of an oval has been like one of the most revolutionary things in my chart making. Isn't that weird to say? That is a weird thing to say, but it's like something as simple as that. It's like, no, the body's an oval, it's not a stick. At least not mine over COVID. My body's much more oval now. But anyway, so I'm gonna text Kim and see if she's okay. And she will come back in a moment. But in the meantime, I wanted to move to our next thing until, if and when She is able to join us. Wi-Fi is so unpredictable, but I just wanted to open it to a Q&A a little bit, to think about what's on your mind. How can we be helpful? It's a small group, so feel free to either just unmute yourself and ask your question, or to type in the chat box if you're more comfortable. Anything at all. There are, oh, well, get ready for that because Kim's back. Yay. But get ready after that. It's going to be a Q&A session, so think of your questions. There are no quote unquote dumb questions. All questions are totally valid and everybody needs to hear them. And they're going to be helpful. Anyway, Kim, the place you dropped off on was like facial expressions.
Yes. Okay. Bear with me.
It's all good. One thing I found is we're so forgiving and understanding with tech issues that it's like, it's super embarrassing when it happens to you. But when you see somebody else do it, you're like, it's totally cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'll be mortified when my internet drops off if in 15 minutes. If it does, I'll be like, oh my goodness, this is the end of the universe.
Well, I got a new computer recently and all of my Zoom, I couldn't do breakout rooms. I had to like set it up so that it would allow me to share my screen. I was like, what is even happening? You know what? Let's just do it. Let's do it this way. Oh, Mike, can you make it so that I can share my screen? Maybe that might be. I'm saying host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Okay, cool, yeah. Okay. Okay, so thinking about facial expressions, we've got our happy, we've got our, oh, my sad face, or my my mad face. I think a lot about like, is the mouth a version of happy or sad? So if I'm feeling frustrated, I might be using a face that kind of looks like this. And then you've got your eyebrows, right? They get mad eyebrows. And I'm trying to think of worried or like anxious or anything like that is often like bloop, 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 wiggly lines, things like that. In terms of hair, I feel like most of my energy goes into how am I going to draw the hair? And I want to make sure that I'm thinking about how the visuals in my class look. So do they, am I showing characters or little figures that look like the students in front of me? Am I also showing characters and little people that don't look like the kids that are sitting in front of me? And both of those are very, very important. So I want to make sure that I'm representing everyone who is in the room and also everyone who is not in the room as well, which is no tiny task. So when I'm thinking about hair, I think about when I think about like, this is sort of like when I'm thinking about myself as a self-portrait. It's like, I've got my little side pony, right? When I'm thinking about shorter hair, I've got like hair like this, or hair, little curls, blip, 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 that kind of thing. I think about when I'm watching shows or TV, or movies, I pick up on, oh, I like that hairstyle, or oh, I could use that one. I'm trying to think of what movie, what show we were watching. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There was one that I was like, oh, I like that hairstyle. I'm going to use that. So in that one, the main character has like these little cute little buns, and then she has little braids. And I just thought that was so cool. And I totally stole this from a TV show we were watching. You'll probably see it now you're going to notice it in the charts. You're going to be like, oh, that's the one Kim got from the TV show. But so thinking about buns, thinking about braids, thinking about, my high school art teacher, I loved him. He often talked about when you draw hair, you don't need to do every single thing. And that's very true in drawings like this. You're never going to get every eyelash, every strand of hair, but you can start to get a little bit of the je ne sais quoi of the hairstyle, right? So I've got, and I'm thinking about like a braid. I can do, yes, I could think about, okay, I could imagine the 3 colors in my little klutz braiding book that I had growing up, but I can also kind of do these like bloop, like that. They're not, it's not every hair, it's not everything. It's just sort of like, it kind of goes like generally like this. That's je ne sais quoi. So these are a couple of little tips. So we think about body, we think about face, and of course we think about hair. And one thing that I think is so important when we talk about this work with kids, when we talk about this work, and by this work I mean drawing, how many of us have said, I'm not a good artist, but in front of our students? Who said it? Yeah, there it is. So when we say that to our students, what sort of things are we expecting them to say about themselves? Oh, I'm not a good reader, but oh, I'm not good at this, but I'm like, no, I would never allow one of my students to say that without pausing and saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. We've been doing all of this work this year around mindset and around how we talk about ourselves and our classmates. So we can be models. Doesn't mean it's going to feel great every single time. You're going to like draw the foot going the wrong direction, right? But we can model with kids. I know, it's oh man, what are the strategies we have? Okay, well, I can use my shapes to draw. I can kind of imagine in my mind. I can think about, oh, I know drawing sometimes makes me feel a little bit flustered. It might make you feel flustered too. Yeah. Okay, here I go. Instead of, oh no, I'm not good at this. I know, right? I mean, I've definitely had kids be like, what is that? What is that? Or they say, oh, you forgot, right? Oh, you forgot the nose. You forgot the this. I'm like, friends, quick sketch. I want to get the je ne sais quoi. So how we talk about ourselves as artists is going to impact how our students talk about themselves in other capacities as well. So don't say, I'm not a good artist, but any, Mike, you want to add anything? Or
I mean, I just got some good tips for how to draw hair, especially
yeah.
ponytails and pigtails. It looks effortless, and it doesn't just look effortless. It actually is. The more you practice doing these things, the more it flows, and you forgive yourself. Like, you saw Kim's self-portrait, like one ear was bigger than the other. Or did you? If you didn't notice that, then nobody else is going to either. You know what I mean? Those little things where you may like, one ear is bigger than the other. You probably didn't even notice that, and like passed right by, and you just make it. The image is supposed to evoke something, and the thing that you're evoking is the thing that you're trying to convey in the image. And so nobody's going to be like, the ear is this, the ear is that. I mean, sometimes kids will, and that creates for fun conversations, just like when we misspell words on the board. But you always redirect their attention and say, well, the point is this, and they appreciate that too. They appreciate that approximation. And I've gone through the same, I'm definitely not in Kim's league, but I've definitely gone through the same process. And I no longer say I'm not a good drawer, because people tell me I'm great. The people say they want to pay me for my toolkits and stuff like that. And so I'm like, well, I am a good drawer then, if people want to pay me for my toolkit. So this is definitely great tips if you want to start create images for anything, any teaching, but specifically for vocabulary, the ways to evoke the images. All right, so now we'll move to our next portion, which is just a Q&A. Any questions, ideas, or celebrations, anything that's been on your mind. If you just want to open up the floor to us, we've got an intimate group, so feel free to, like I said, unmute yourself or type in the chat, and we'll talk about the things that are on your mind.
Thinking some of you are also in different places in terms of your year. Who has kids already? Yeah, okay. And some of us have not started the school year at all. So the anxieties are different, right? So thinking about, people who are already in it with kids, what are some things that are coming up? What are some things that you've learned about your students already in terms of vocabulary? And then for those who haven't started yet, you're kind of like, okay, these are the thoughts that I'm having.
So I have a quick question. I saw that you made the charts in color, so thank you for that. I ordered those. But the slides also, how do you recommend using those as part of the curriculum?
The slides are just one sort of medium, and they're for those who prefer using slides. Samantha, if you're not a slides person, you may not go in that direction. But I know, especially since a lot of people went remote, and even before then, slides have been a part of teaching. So I just want to first just say that they're one medium to convey visual information. In terms of using the slides, then you'd use them just in the way that you might use any visual. And so the one thing that is different about the slides is they also have, I also pasted in the actual curriculum into the presentation notes so that you can read the presentation notes while the kids are just looking at the slides. So that a lot of times teachers will use slides as, all of us, not just teachers, but anybody who uses slides will use them as like a teleprompter, and that's not really a helpful thing for anybody, especially children. Like, slides should not be teleprompters then it's just for us, right? And so one of the goals of the slides is it's actually want it to be useful to the students, but it also has the presentation notes already baked into it too. And so one thing I'm thinking about doing is creating some asynchronous videos. I actually made some videos today that can show you how to use the slides, that can kind of be a visual, but essentially, if you look at the sample that's in the latest email that was sent, I think on Thursday, if you open it up and you click the presentation mode, you can see like what it says that you could say while kids are viewing a particular thing on the screen. That said, I'm not saying like I'm all about slides or this. I just know that it's one way that people appreciate conveying images visually. Am I answering your question at all? Actually, I'm wondering if
No, you definitely are. I just wasn't sure if it was like to share with kids that then they can use as like to reference. Like, I would have like my charts up and I would leave the words up on the chart.
Yeah, well, that's a big issue with slides is, do students have access to your slide deck that they can just like dig into that file whenever they need them? And so the charts are also there too. But if you have the slides, you can always print out like a page of the slides for kids to reference. But yeah, the purpose of charts is to put them up on the wall so that they can see them when they need them to reference. And so they're both great. I think I wouldn't, but if I were, and you can tell me about what you've been doing because you're actually using it day to day, is I would probably have like the charts up in the classroom, but if I were teaching from slides, I would have the slide deck up. But yeah, you would definitely have the charts up so that they can reference it.
Yeah, I think during the lesson, having the slide up as I'm teaching, but then putting it up onto the chart to then leave it up so that kids can
at all times.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Corey's asking, how do you recommend collecting words? Could you categorize words in some cases? I'm thinking about character traits and feelings chart to collect these words across the year from read alouds. Yeah. And I like what Mike's saying, if you're not someone who is using slides, don't feel like if that doesn't work for you, that's okay. When I think about collecting, my teaching style has sort of always been kind of like down and dirty, right? So I'm thinking about like chart paper, Post-its as we're reading. I'm going to write draw a quick image and write the word. I might, if we're following a character across a book or even across multiple books in a series, I might make a chart specifically for that student. But what I'm imagining is really just chart paper. I'm sure there are other people who have come up with cool and interesting ways to collect, but that's sort of, what are your thoughts, Mike?
Oh, I was just clearing my throat and I realized I wasn't muted, but I wasn't trying to signify anything. The question was, how do I recommend collecting the words? The way that I collect words is, when I go through the book and I read a book and I ask myself, do I hear kids using this word in their talk? And do I see them using it in their writing? Right. I'm looking for expressive vocabulary. So they might understand it if I say it to them or if they read it, but that's not good enough for me, because individual words is about deep word learning. This isn't about just like, let's enjoy words and let's learn words at a surface level. This is about deep learning. So if I'm not hearing you using it and if I'm not seeing you writing it, then it's not in your expressive. It might be in your receptive. And that's one of the things I try to point out in the vocabulary, because a lot of times when we show the list of words to kids, the kids are like, I know all these words. And then the question is like, well, why aren't you using them?
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm not hearing you use it. I'm not seeing, I'm not seeing your writing. I want a deep knowledge of this word, and I should be seeing it then. And so that's how I pick it. And so I create this list of like dozens and dozens of words where I'm not seeing or hearing them. And then I have to like narrow them down, and I have to think about, well, which is the most useful? Is this a word that is like I can use across content areas? This is a word that's only content, like I have to make that decision. And if it appears a lot, then I'm more often to use it. If it's a word that might appear on a test, like in a question in a STEM, a high stakes, like academic vocabulary, it gets a little bump up, but that's generally how I use it. I think that's what you mean by collecting words. I don't discern whether it's a character trait feeling word or anything. I think those are important. I think one of the things that Kim and I have talked about working on in the future, and I've shared with the group, is creating something that's more writing based. And so like, what are the words that you might use in your writing, or the words that you might need to know when you're reading or writing narrative, or when you're reading or writing opinion, an argument, or when you're reading or writing information. So some of them might be ones that you use in your writing, and some of them might be like, these are just words that you should probably know this word if you're in this genre. And so that's something that we're thinking about for the future, as we're basically, I think this is our last year of like revising it, and then it's going to be kind of set. Kim and I have talked about, like, because we're not going to do this forever. We're going to move on to bigger, but I mean, I don't know, better. This is pretty great. We think we love it, but we're going to move on to different things for you. I mean, we listen to your feedback, and so those are some of the places that we're thinking about going. But in terms of collecting words, kids can also collect words. Like anytime you come to a word that's just like, what do you like? What's interesting? Like what struck your fancy? In my classroom, like when I was ever reading a read aloud and a word was just beautiful, I would pause and be like, oh, can I just read this again? It's gorgeous. So those are like more ways that, if you're asking me, how do I collect words for individual word learning? That's what I just said. But if it's just collecting words for, a culture of word love, like Kim talked about earlier, it's whatever the muse strikes your fancy. You hear an interesting word, you hear grown-ups talk about an interesting word, you're not sure what it means, you hear it on the news, what is it? You read it in your read aloud. It's I don't know. I mean, I almost spy on yourself. Where are the moments in your life and in your reading and you're listening, do you pause over the word itself, whether it's beautiful or interesting or confusing or whatever it is, and then spy on yourself when those moments happen? And sometimes it's just the muse, like it's just like, it's almost like magic. A little fairy whispers in your ear, this is the word to be curious about. And sometimes it's a particular thing that you're doing, like you're studying something. But so I guess I can't really, when it comes to a culture, it's just like, it just strikes your fancy in a way. But when it comes to teaching individual words, I'm a little more targeted. It's kind of like, I want to hear you say it, I want to see you write it. and then I look in their books to see which ones they're not using yet.
I'm also thinking about like their reading notebooks. I'm thinking about if there are words that they want to try to use that they're sort of like hot on at the time. Maybe they have a couple of words on a post-it in their, in their writing notebook, some words that they know they want to play with. But that might be something even you can set up from the beginning of the year to say, as we read, we find a ton of words that make us go, wait, what? And so we can collect those words just as we're reading, those words that feel powerful for whatever reason, right? Whenever I'm thinking about words that have the most, when I'm choosing words that I want to use in my instruction, I think about, can I reasonably use it by 3:00 tomorrow? Right? So I can, yes, I could tuck in the word mitochondria between now and tomorrow at 3 p.m., but I'd have to work for it. Whereas, can I use the word salient? I use the word salient kind of a lot. It's quite a salient word. But so yes, that's a word that I feel like I could like work into my conversation between now and 3:00. So that's my little hot tip. Is like, could I reasonably tuck this in by 3:00 without really, don't choose mitochondria.
Well, it's the powerhouse of the cell, we all know. But yeah, you're right. The larger point is that, is it transferable? Is it useful that you can use a lot? And that's not to say that content area vocabulary isn't useful. It's actually extraordinarily useful when you're studying that content, for sure. But just like in the individual word experts, Beck, McKeon, and Kukin, they recommend like words that transfer across content, that are, like Kim says, which are handy rule of thumb is, can I use this tomorrow at 3, right? And so that's something helpful. And so Corey got another question. Thank you. Do you use similar steps introducing and teaching new words K2? Yes, there are some things that are different. Kim made an allusion to this earlier. One of the things that's different is the words that you might choose, because if you're reading a K2 book, it may, but it may not have the rich vocabulary that you're looking for. And so one of the things I often talk about is like, well, then choose vocabulary that appears within the book and the environment and the milieu of the book, but that's not explicitly stated.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a character who's wants something that somebody else has, well, you can introduce the word envy then, but envy might not appear in the book, right? And so that's a big recommendation for K2, which is you might have to come up with, the idea is like sometimes there's new words for concepts that kids know, and sometimes there's new words for concepts they don't know yet. And so kids have an understanding of jealousy, right? And so this is a concept that they know, you're just giving them a new word for it. What you want to be more cautious about is like, am I teaching a K2? I would say, and Kim, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You want to be more cautious about am I teaching them a brand new concept at all? Because then you have to be like, well, do they have a developmental understanding of this concept if I teach idiom or irony or sarcasm? No, I mean, I would be loath to teach sarcasm to 3rd graders. I would, but in my own experience, end of 4th grade is the best time to do sarcasm, right? Because that's when they actually understand it. And some of the kids who have older siblings are actually being sarcastic. That doesn't mean there aren't 3rd graders or younger who aren't being sarcastic, but by and large, a lot of them, if you're ever sarcastic with a younger kid, they turn their head to the side and like, how could you possibly say opposite of what you mean? But other things like are a little bit tricky, but like, or like the actually kids do understand it. Like they sound pretty fancy, but kids get it. Like one time to a group of 3rd graders, I introduced the word irrelevant. You ever had kids in your mini lesson where you're in the midst of your teaching the mini lesson, like, what's for lunch today? And I'd be like, that's irrelevant. And they would be like, huh? They'd be like, rent. But by the end of the year, when kid would ask like an irrelevant question, they'd very kindly be like, hey, that's irrelevant. And so what we're doing right now, and it was like 8-year-olds, or the word I often use is like, it's the one that has to do with exception, because oftentimes I'll use naked mole rat. Naked mole rat is this word exception. Like, dang, do kids have an understanding of what an exception is? That's really high level. I'm like, no, exception has to do with fairness. Like exception has to do with like something that goes against the rules or not the way things usually go. And boy, isn't that the life of a child when you're always noticing something going against the rules or not the way things usually go. Yeah, you can teach exception to kids. It's a concept that they know and it's a new word for it. So that's a little bit about what I would say about K2, but I want to defer to Kim for more information.
The other reality of teaching vocabulary in a K2 classroom is that the books are shorter. So you're spending a little bit less time with each individual book. So we can think about words that are going to have power. This is where you as the teacher might create some text sets. So I might find 3 or 4 books about sibling drama, or about a family having a kind of a similar experience, like a family moving, or a new baby. It's not some sort of like shift that I can talk about some words that are going to be applicable across texts. And because you're not necessarily going to delve as deep into a book as you would if you're reading a 300 page, if you're reading Stone Fox. So thinking about creating little text sets for yourself and thinking about what are the words, like we've talked about, that are either within the text or the words that are going to be used to talk across the text, and making it visual. So, doing this work with kids, I will talk about some of the words. These are some words we're going to use to talk about the books that we'll read. And then while we read and after we read, when we're having our conversations, I'm coaching kids to and tell me how might that character have been feeling in that mind? Oh my goodness, disheveled, right? Whatever. But using some of the words that, encouraging kids to use some of the words in their oral language as well. So thinking about the books are different in K2, the words that you're choosing might be slightly different, but also I would say don't shy away from using high level vocabulary with little people. Just make sure you're giving them lots and lots of opportunities to try it out. Oh yeah, how would you use that? Could you use that word in a sentence? Could you describe the character that way? You're there to sort of facilitate and coach, but kids are able to do a lot more when they're being asked to do the same thing lots of times in lots of different ways. Yeah. Chat box. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the beginning of the year, the books that we read at the beginning of the year, books about community, books about, but I've been thinking also about picking books where the characters have been feeling, I've been thinking a lot about anxiety and that concept of anxiety, and thinking about books that sort of fit with that concept of anxiety. My daughter loves this book called The Rabbit Listened, and it's all about this kid the tower comes crashing down, and all these animals come and try to help, and then the rabbit comes and just listens. And it gets at this idea of you can't always solve the problem right away. But it also just gets at that character feelings are so nuanced. Our feelings are so nuanced. It's not so easy to say, oh, Taylor feels this way. Instead, we have to really try out a couple of different words. And I think about anxiety a lot as like, anxiety might show up as anger. Anxiety might show up as withdrawal. Anxiety might show up as hyperactivity, and helping our students really understand some of those emotions that are not happy, sad, excited, mad, right? Where is the nuance that we can use to describe the characters in our books, but also ourselves and the things that we might be feeling right now.
Boy, is that true. I've been looking at our words, Kim, and a lot of them have like negative connotations. And I'm like, shame and all these things. And they're good words, but I'm like, man, we should put some more positive words there. But hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles, because these words appear a lot and they're important words. But yeah, they're not always the most positive words. If you have any other questions, please post them here in the chat box. Happy to answer them. I want to give a few pieces of news before we go. And one of them is just to keep your eye on the timeline of what's coming up. So, here we are, Kim, we're like making a promise to people. So we got to get hustling. We're coming out with unit 2 soon, right? And we're aiming for this. This is like 2 weeks from now. And so what Kim's doing is she's revising the charts and making, if you're interested, and I'll talk about this more in the moment, in some of the color charts. What I'm doing is I'm revising them to make sure that there's more space practice and interleaving and more options for games, and taking in the feedback from our pilots from last year. And so these are the ones that are coming up next, but just keep in mind, go to your welcome message. If you ever lost where this is, this in your welcome message, this should be here when like the units were like first released around like July 25th or whatever it was. But this is the general schedule for when things plan to go. So we got 5 others coming up here: reading to learn, mystery, up the ladder, nonfiction reading, reading the weather, reading the world, and tackling complexity. You also have the 5 that are, I know some people are doing like interpretation book clubs later or different units later. So there's also 5 that are also completed right now. So just as a heads up, that's there. Jennifer, when do you introduce the words each day? That's a great question. One thing I'm going to direct you toward real quick, I'm going to answer that question, but also check out my YouTube page, Mike Oakes. And if you go to a couple places, one, it could be like vocabulary curriculum, where you can see, I think the hour, somewhere here, there's like an hour-long meeting that we had back in July that will talk a little bit about some of those things. But other things that you might be interested in, I create a little podcast that helps. It's like free PD for the unit and how it goes. And so there's like 10 episodes. The 10th one should be coming out on Tuesday. I try to do them like once a week. But you can see just like some background information. YouTube's got a video, but there's also, if you want to listen to it on like Anchor or Spotify or anything else, you can listen to it, on your phone as you're doing whatever. And notice they're all short. They're just like, they're less than an episode of a sitcom. So they're brief to listen to or to view. But to answer your question, to introduce the words, Beck, Jennifer, thank you for adding in. A lot of this is from Beck McKeon and Bringing Words to Life. But introducing words is generally recommended after you've read them in the text. And so that's why sometimes the beginning of units are a little wonky, because I want you to get through the text a little bit so you can say, remember when we read this part of Home of the Brave, of Tiger Rising, of Indian Shoes, Stone Fox, You're the Dog. This happened, and now I want to re-reference that word. But Beck McKeon can say you could introduce the word before you read it or as you read it. If they just recommend that you do it after you've read it, so kids have a context. The reason is you want kids to have a context that serves as a mnemonic device for them to remember the word. We're storytelling creatures, so if you can connect these words to the stories that you're reading, they're going to be more apt to remember them because they actually occurred somewhere. Does that mean it has to occur after? No. If you listen to, I think it's probably episode 1 or 2 or 3, it talks a little bit more about that, about why sometimes the beginning of the units are a little wonky, but it doesn't matter. Like, you can, even if you haven't reached the word in your book, maybe the concept of the word has appeared earlier in the book, and you can say, we haven't reached this word envy, but actually some envy appeared in chapter 1. And let me just show you how, it doesn't say envy, but it appeared in chapter 1. And let's talk about that real quick. And I'm trying to think of if there's any other information I want to share with you. If you've been following online, you obviously been getting the emails or the connections. If you haven't been getting the emails, by the way, you might want to make sure you add my email address to your address book. It is mike@readwritemike.org. If you're not, I send weekly or bi-weekly emails. And sometimes people who sign up with district addresses aren't receiving them because your school district has super high filters. Nothing's getting through. And so you could check your junk or your spam folder, but I've talked to a lot of people who signed up with district emails, not even getting in. It's not even it's not even passing those things. So it might be you sign up with a more personal email address, or you add my email to your address so that when it shows up, it's like, oh, this is a friend. This isn't some stranger danger or anything. Just as a heads up. But trying to think of anything else that might be of importance. You might check out, if you're interested. Don't feel obligated at all. We provide the curriculum and the basic charts for free. It's something that we believe in, and we think that's important. But if you want a little flair, a little extra, we've provided some, Kim has made some color charts. You can go to readwritemike.com/shop if you're not yet familiar with it. Or we just added the slides if you want to. Some of this stuff, honestly, this isn't something that we're making a huge profit off of. This is a gift to the world. This helps kind of keep the internet lights on to host a website, host MailChimp that sends all the emails, host YouTube and all. It basically pays for a lot of the web fees. And so it's a gift. But if you like them, use them by all means, have at it. But also we just want to have that available to you if you want a little bit of flair as you're teaching it. But as always, all the units and all the basic charts, PD, like tonight, the podcast, free, pro bono type of thing, because we believe that this is important work. And if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. If it's worth doing well, it's worth doing as accessible as possible. And so some of those things, yeah, right. Well, maybe, who knows? We'll see how big this is. We have reached our 1,500th subscriber this past week or so. Actually, we're almost close to 1,600 subscribers, and I think the reach is pretty big. So one of the last things I want to share with is, by all means, share this on social media. I'm trying to move a lot of this work into Instagram since it's so visual. I'm trying to get off of my Twitter a little bit, maybe move it to Instagram. It's all the same, Read Write Mike. But if you're doing some work, let's use our hashtag for the curriculum, Word Love, and that way we can stay connected. You don't have to, necessarily do things always through me. You can reach out to each other, talk about ways to make the work better, share what you're doing, because a lot of times I see it. People email me, people contact me, they text me and I get to see these great things, or I'll retweet when I see it on Twitter. But if you reach out to each other, you can see the cool things, because this is a curriculum. You're going to make it your own. What we create is not the be all end all. And a lot of people have made it better than it is. And if you have, like, everybody benefits from that. And so if you're on Twitter, if you are on Instagram, or I'm not really on Facebook, but maybe I'll get back on it after a break. But we'll have our hashtag word love to stay connected. We'll provide more meetings throughout the year to just answer questions, support one another, keep things going. But stay tuned. I think one of the things I've been working on is some asynchronous videos, because who knows if you're going to need some. And so I've been trying to record some to make those available. Yeah. And Jennifer, we can all use, I got like, it seemed like such a simple thing, but I got like a huge tip on how to draw a ponytail. And I'm like probably going to practice it when we log off right now, personally.
I mean, even as I'm drawing these like much more detailed colored images, like the app that I use has layers, and the first layer, there's those bubble people. That's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same process. So thinking about ways to make your drawings more dynamic will make your life a lot easier. I also find that I draw the same stuff over and over again, right? And that helps a lot.
It only makes you better at it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a lot of people moving, people walking, lots of cats, lots of books, lots of writing booklets.
Well, colleagues, we want to thank you for your time. I know and if you're on the East Coast, it's getting a little bit late, and for all of you, it's your Sunday evening, and you're probably showing up tomorrow to a schoolhouse to teach. So stay in touch, stay tuned. Thank you for joining us. We hope it's helpful, and we will see you later. Take care.
Bye.